everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Monica McMahon, and I am super excited to have Ryan Houston, I can't say your name anymore, Ryan Houston with us today to talk about Optigo OneView. How are you doing, Ryan?
Doing fantastic, doing well, thank you.
Great. This is our last webinar of the year, so thank you so much for joining us. As a reminder, our webinar will be recorded. We will be putting it on YouTube later, so feel free to subscribe to our channel, check it out there. And if you have any questions throughout the webinar, you can ask them in your chat box, and we will get back to them as we see fit. But we will get back to any and all questions that are answered. If we don't do it live, we will get back to you after the webinar. So without any further ado, Ryan, I'm going to leave it to you to give us a demo of Optigo OneView.
All right, let's do it. So for those of you that don't know, Optigo OneView is our centralized management interface that resides on the part ONS NC600. This is critical for any system so that you can manage everything from one spot without having to go from switch to switch to be able to view and look at all of its statuses. This interface, the way we've designed it, is to make it as simple as possible. We're not going to show you every single feature of the switch because a lot of them aren't relative to our industry, but we are going to show you everything that's relevant. And what the goal is to simplify it, get you up and running, get you the information that you need as quickly as possible. So now that we've said that, to go in and play with this interface, the second you log into it, you come into unit status. Now there's a whole system, there's a whole bunch of information on the left-hand side here, but right away we can look at some basic information. So we have unit status, tells us how long it's been up and running for. This particular demo is based on our lab, so it's used from time to time. Shows you the unit temperature. This is a really good number. Anything getting closer to 70 degrees, and you might want to give us a call, but until then, we're happy. 3 edge switches have been registered with the system and 3 are online. That's what the 3 for 3 means. So at any time that this number is different, that would be an indication that you have to go in and do a little bit of work. And the amount of ports connected are 17. So if you go into the system and look all the time, this number should be the same. If it starts to change or climb and you've never been back to site, it might be something that you want to go look at. In this particular demo, this is our Spectra fiber PON solution. It's got 8 individual fiber ports. Inside of this, we have 2 of them that are connected and turned on. The third one's turned on, but it says link down. That's because it doesn't have an SFP into the slot. So it's showing us that all 3 switches are actually residing on 2 different ports. And again, the temperatures are all fine, so it gives you a quick indication of what's happening here. From here, you can reboot the unit remotely, so you don't have to go to site and unplug and plug in the cable. And also on the left-hand side, it shows you similar information, but this stays static and stays up while you're playing around in the other ports. Now, some more interesting information is up here is the user who's logged in, and in this location here, these are the alerts that are in the system. So when you click on that, we can actually see everything that's happening in this network. So we can see there's 51 major notifications, a whole bunch of minor notifications. Keep in mind this is a lab-based unit, so it is being utilized all the time. But we can figure out with some very quick pre-filters, everything that we need to look at. So online, we have no online events, which is great. If we click on the offline, we're safe there too. We can look at any unread information. So there's a lot of information here that we can actually figure out and find. And if you're looking for something specific, you can simply filter it. So if I want to see how many users have logged in, I can filter in that information directly. So it gives you the opportunity to filter these categories and find the information that you want very, very quickly. In addition, there's this, we call it the correct term is a hamburger menu. up on the right-hand side, it shows you some additional information such as settings. So if you're in this system and you want the notification pop-up, such as something's been added to the system or the alerts, you can enable, or if they're annoying you, you can disable for the time being and save that change. You can do a change password if you're required. And if you ever get stuck into doing a little bit more support, there's some information in the download menu of what you can download. So for instance, if you're trying to help us help you, all the logs, configuration database, system database are all information that we would require. For any maintenance and service, these two, the configuration and system database, are something you should download on a quarterly basis. That means if any of the S8 or the NC600 dies, then you can take these databases, put them back in the new system, and you're up and running. So that's a very important one that you want to think of and keep in mind. There's user accounts, so you can have quite a few user accounts. These are ones where you can have read-only, you can have admin rights. So if there's anyone else playing in your system, say you're doing VAS and you want to have the lighting guys have access to the system, then you can do it here. There's a bunch of help documentation already built in here. So this, along with our support site, which you can find at support.optigo.net. Monica, if you want to throw that in the chat as well for our viewers, that would be helpful. And there's some basic information here to get you moving. There's also a glossary of information to say what all this short terms that we're talking about actually means.
Yeah,
and
just throwing that link in there now.
Fantastic, thank you. The report is a major feature here where once you're done configuring your system, we can go through and we can spit out a report. I'll let it generate, it takes a bit of time. You can spit out a report, put it in your job documentation and say this is the state of the entire system. You can do this, you can save it and export it. Again, we'll come back to that. It's going to take a bit of time to generate. But this gives you an actual report of every single feature on the system. And that way, if anything happens, again, if you haven't forgot to save out that information or someone wants to know where it was left, where the last state was, you've got actual paper documentation to prove it. And then, of course, you can log out. So from there, we have done yet? Here it is. So here's a report showing all of the information, all the different ports, everything that we look at in a live interface is all here. So this is a very critical report, and I recommend saving it every time you do some work, so you've got a record of this. On the left-hand side, we're in the configuration menu. Here is where you define the management IP of this device. So this is the IP address that the owner's IT network would give you, and you would put it here. We specify a VLAN for management. So you would have a separate VLAN for management and a separate VLAN for all of the switches and networks to talk. Simply because if you have a problem if you put it all together and you have a problem in your switch network, it then affects your management network, which means you wouldn't be able to log into this because it would be busy or choked and you wouldn't really have access to the system. So it's just good practice to separate them. It's going to have the date and time. Something to note, you'll want to make sure that you give this a time server, system name, system description. It's going to, up here is where you set it to your local. So this is connected to my laptop and set local time. You can change the time zone, so you can do some information in here. You can also back up or restore your database in this location. Pretty simple. So that's all information you would do to start up and get this system running. From here, you would look at your lasers. So we, by default, enable all of the lasers. All you need to do is insert the SFPs into the slot and you're up and running. This is always helpful in troubleshooting if you want to turn them on or off. This is where you set up your redundancy settings. So if you're using 2 sets of S8 and NC600, you would do the configuration in this location. So the recommendation for redundancy, we do have a guide to help you through that, but it would be where you set up one system completely and everything works, and then you would copy the database, or sorry, you would go to the other sys side, set that up, and then you would copy the database from one to the next. There are further instructions inside of the support site. Now this one here is bandwidth. This is my personal favorite because everybody always asks, how much bandwidth do I have? For your reference, each optical port can support 1 gigabit of bandwidth each for a total of 8 gigs on the entire switch. But it's always good to know, especially in camera systems, on how much bandwidth do you have left? How much are you actually playing with here? So we can see all lasers on the entire system, very little bandwidth being used. But we can actually go to the specific laser on the specific optical port and figure out how much bandwidth is being used port by port. As we don't have a lot of action in our lab, there's not a lot to see here, but imagine if this was at 950 megs. You say, can I add a few more cameras? Well, yes, you can add a couple more, but so instead of connecting the cameras and hoping it works, this actually gives you real information. These counters and all this information down here, this gives you information of saying traffic is passing. If you're wondering why a camera isn't coming up and these are all at 0, it's pretty good indication you might have some wiring problems. So we use this for troubleshooting as well. We are going to ask you from time to time what the version is. So the current software version's here. We do keep a previous software version in the box so we know where it's been upgraded from, and if you ever have to revert, then we can go back to the previous version. A lot of systems you can only go one way, which is sometimes dangerous. I mean, not everything's perfect. We try to be as perfect as possible and have a clean upgrade process, but there are factors that we can't always control that change that. And if everything goes crazy, then you can reset back to factory default. This information is critical for us because it allows us to help you better. So this is the software version, and this is hardware version of both the aggregation switch, the S8 and the NC600. Now the RSSI, in the Spectra PON system, we get RSSI or signal strength directly from some of the switches that support it. This gives us a good indication of what we're looking at to make sure that the fiber splitting is working correctly. We'll work with you on this to troubleshoot it. We'll ask for this from time to time, but mostly if we've designed it right, we won't have to worry about this too much. Now into the fun stuff. This is showing you all of the edge switches that are available and they're currently connected to the system. So we can see this guy here is connected to optical port 2. We haven't named him yet, but if you're going to name a switch, you should name it something smart like air handler 1, main floor, closet 112A, or however your site is lined up.
So don't just name them like Bob and John and Jill.
1-A. There's a reason for this, because now that I know this, I know what it's serving, the equipment on it, I know where it's located. So if I need to go find this, I know where it is, right? It's a huge advantage. We show you what switch it is. So it's an 801, it's an industrial grade switch. We know its MAC address. We know that it has one device in here, and it's got out of we have 7 rules set, but only one is actually connected. So you can actually take this switch and you can turn it on and you can turn it off. We're gonna pop up in the corner saying it's disabled. But this can help. Say you're not ready to connect the switch, or you've put it here and it's not quite online yet, then you can turn it off. And once you're ready to go, turn it back on. From here, and any one of these switches, we can actually get into a little bit more information. So by that brings us into a new menu. So here it's showing me some information on transceiver settings. So this is the SFP that's in the switch. Shows us information directly on the switch itself. Shows us a PoE budget. Remember before we had a bandwidth budget, now we have a power budget on PoE. This is really cool because we can actually determine what the draw is per port, and we can look at how much more is left in the entire switch to be able to support something else. So 17.5 watts are used. Let's say a VAV box takes 20 watts, then we can put in almost 11 more controllers to be able to handle that. You can click on the ports page. So this is a lighter version of the overall ports page that we see up on this side, but we'll go through it from here. So we can see identification of all the individual ports, the status of each port, so I can turn them on and off. We could turn off the PoE and turn it back on if you want. You can figure out what the link speed is, 10 meg, 100 meg, 1000 meg, or if the link status is broken, if it's down, not connected. Shows you a VLAN mode. This is more advanced configuration, but for the most part, we take care of this for you. Shows you the VLAN that each port is connected to. And I'm not going to show you this directly here. There's a better view to set all these up, but it's very, very easy to change. And again, a description. So you want something to say, this is a VAV chain of 25 devices, for example. Because you could daisy chain a lot of the newer controllers now, we're only going to see one port, and there's going to be 25 controllers connected to it. And it lets us know if security is on or off. One important thing, and this applies throughout the system, is we can click on all of these and make a bulk change. Let's do it this way. So say I want to do a bulk change and I want to disable all the PoE all at once. So we can do that quickly. Before we would have to go into each individual one and disable it. Not so bad on an 8-port switch, but once you get into a 24 or 48-port switch, that becomes lengthy. And then on to one-click secure. So this page is very similar to the security page over here. So this is where we can secure all the ports. So you can see some checkboxes here on the left. Secure and active ports. What this means, there's a hover tooltip here for you if you don't quite remember. Inactive ports means I'm going to turn off a port even if it doesn't have a device connected to it. So if it's free and open, I'm going to plug in my laptop, it's not going to work. I've completely shut it down. Securing active ports means that anything plugged into a port, I'm going to lock it to that MAC address. So again, I can unplug it and plug in my laptop, it's not going to work. Securing multi-device ports, this is a unique feature where, remember that daisy chain of zone controllers, we are going to secure every MAC address that's connected to the single port, all the way down the chain. Once you click on that and you hit lock the switch, it's going to say, you sure you want to do this? It's going to go through, do its thing, and it's already done. So we've locked this specific switch. So we can see there's some information here that's already locked. These two ports had nothing connected to it, and it's locked. Everything's disabled, no power, and these are locked to the MAC address. Now keep in mind, this is for this switch specifically. So now I can come in, I can unlock the switch if you're an administrator, and you can go in and do your work. So now we can get into the ports. So the ports page looks at every single port on the entire system across every single switch that's connected. So there's a couple ports you can use on the S8. We don't recommend doing this because in a redundancy sense, you would just lose this configuration. So we always recommend just using the switch ports. But here's your 801, your 8-port switch. Here's all the ports with a 24-port switch, 2 24-port switches connected to the system. Sometimes you may think this is a little bit long and hard to go through, but we can always figure it out by status. You can say, I want to see all the ports that are disabled. So you can very quickly go figure out everything that you need to see. You can check it by VLAN, you can check it by a link mode, you can check it by VLAN ID. So I'm just going to type in 100 for all the surveillance, and that's, I see all the surveillance VLAN ports across all the switches. Pretty easy to find, pretty easy to set. Now I promised you I would look at the how easy a VLAN is to change. We'll do that here. So you would simply click on this, and I have a VLAN here, so I have VLAN 20, and I've just changed it to HVAC. It's as simple as clicking on it and changing it. The VLAN setup is done over here. We'll get into that next. And you can set these up to have multiple VLANs as well. And here you want to name this appropriately. And once we get into the ports page here, we're going to go in a little bit more detail. So this extra more button has more information than it did when we did the ports page by the switch. This is showing you on this port specifically the port ID that it's connected to, the VLAN mode that it's on, the VLAN that it's connected to it, and how. Shows you the link speed, any description if it's enabled, and your PoE power. Now from here, instead of turning it off and on, I can just go reset the PoE, and anything connected to it is going to be reset out in the field. This is a key feature, especially when you're doing network management remotely. You can also see the power draw. Now in here, we're doing some device authorization stuff. So here's the connected devices. You can actually search for this. These are the MAC addresses that are currently connected to this port. If you had that daisy chain set of zone controllers, you would see a whole list here underneath that. Something important to know, if you had a failure out in the field and you wanted to replace a device, you could simply type in, you would hold it in your hand in front of you, log into the system remotely, add a MAC address into the chain in this port, and then enter it. And when you enter a MAC address, you can run the whole entire MAC address. You can run the first 4 bytes. You can enter it in a multitude of ways. Once you do that and add it, I think I can do this. I need X's apparently. So anything specified with an AE, I'm not sure whose MAC address out in the world that is, but anything in there, I can apply the security rule to it. And what that means is any device that doesn't have this AE will automatically not be able to get to the system. So you could take something like whoever has reserved MAC addresses out in the field, like Badista, Delta, JCI, Honeywell, they all do the same thing. Then you could reserve the system just to put that in here. But back to replacing a device, put in the MAC address, send the tech to field, and he installs it. He doesn't have to log into the system. He doesn't have to reset security. You just simply replace the device because we've already allowed it to enter onto the system. So we can enable security rules. Right now they're not enabled, but we can do this from a port, from a switch, from a full system-wide perspective. So right now we've enabled these devices. You can hit the enable button and it will actually apply the rule. Of course, we can authorize all of them, anything currently connected, or disable the rules. And there's some information down here saying this is the switch model. There's a certain amount of rules per switch and a certain amount of rules per port. Some of these are limited by the switch that you're using. The industrial switches have a little bit less rules than the other ones, but something to think about. But we can always do a little bit. We can do some tricks in the MAC address allowance to increase that rule set. This one here, this is called pair port. What this does is, let's go back to the loop of daisy chain zone controllers. In a lot of cases, we want to have this loop back in a spanning tree scenario. So I'm going to go out of port 1, come back to port 2. The reason we do the pair port is for the security rules. So we can make sure that the security rules are not duplicated, but that they know that port 1 and 2 share the same set of security rules. And we connect it that way. So we know that which ports are connected to the same string of devices. Otherwise, all of these rules are going to be duplicated throughout the system, and you wouldn't have enough to actually secure your site very well. So we put in some tricks to help with that. Counters. For any information that you're looking for to make sure this port's passing traffic, to making sure that your wiring is up to snuff and doing what it should, then we can get this from the specific port. So we can see it's passing a tiny bit of traffic. It's got, this is the total amount of bytes. We'll figure out what the rate is as we calculate it. Yeah, there's hardly any traffic being passed from that camera that's connected. But this allows us to see a lot of information on the system. So yeah, that's all the ports in here. So that's pretty easy to find. You can actually export this list as well. So the view here, you can purely export it. We can export it into Excel or CSV. On to the VLANs. So here we've defined a few VLANs based on color, based on the numbers that we want. And the VLANs are pretty easy to set. Just go add a new VLAN. I'm going to choose a color. I can type in you can type in a color down here if you already know it, or we can choose something specific. I'm going to choose this gaudy color over here. I'm going to set a new VLAN to 250. That's my new VLAN ID. I'm going to say the VMS network. Keep in mind the VLAN IDs maximum of 8 characters, so you have to be a little bit finicky in getting that inside of 8 characters, but we can always have a description of it, saying this is a VMS VLAN for technicians, so everybody knows what it's doing and what it's for. So we submit that, we've created it, now it's here. As we haven't set anything to this VLAN yet, we don't know what the number of ports is, but it's kind of neat to see here that on the individual VLAN, how many ports are connected to that specific VLAN. In our demo, we're primarily surveillance based, just on the amount of devices we have. So you can see that here. At any time, you can go in and edit it, change the color, reset the description. So this would be one of the first things you would do on your site. Define all the VLANs for all the different vendors that are going to be on your site and create this ahead of time. And then this part is the same security screen we've seen before, but this is now for the entire site. So again, secure active ports, secure the inactive ports, secure the multi-daisy chain device ports, and lock the system. So every time you leave a job, come to this screen and set it up. It seriously takes, in our system, it takes 10 seconds. It might take a minute or two, but it makes sure that it gives you peace of mind saying, I'm leaving the site, nothing's left open. Kind of like leaving home and locking your door. It's no different. When you come into work and you're working on the system the next day, you can simply unlock the system. And then you're ready to go and do your changes. If you were to do this any other way, there's batch files and scripts you would have to do. You would have to constantly keep those updated. You would have to log into each switch to do this. It's so cumbersome and complicated that most people would never do it. So this is why it's a very, very critical feature. Now the last one here is under the devices. So what this is showing you, this is a device scan that gets updated on the system. Shows you everything that's currently connected. So we can say, here's a port ID, here's what's connected to it. We see which VLAN it's riding on, its MAC address, is it authorized? So it has a rule attached to it. It's not enabled yet. Shows you the time that it was discovered, its IP address that it's been assigned, the time that we've actually scanned. And so this is the last time that we went and looked for it, and what VLAN we scanned on. Pretty powerful stuff. So we can actually go and do an IP scan. And here you would enter the IP address of something you're looking for, or something on that segment of IP addresses you're after. So 10.10.5.250, for example. You would set the VLAN ID of what you're looking for and do a scan. It's going to go out and take a look at everything and spit out this information. So anyone ever have a problem with a lost controller or lost device? Say you entered an IP address to it, and the second you've done that and hit apply, it no longer shows up on your current screen, and it's somewhere out in the system. You know what you entered, but you can no longer find it. This is a way where you can actually go into the Optigo system, dig around and find out where that device is. This is where it's going to show up. So you're going to say, oh, it's on the port ID A-3-05. I know where it is. I know what VLAN it's on. So it allows you to go find it. These descriptors here are showing you information of where it is. So let's go look at A1008. We'll go back to the ports page. So you're looking for, because the switch was set as A10, and we're looking at the last port, so A1008. And you could actually type that in here if you wanted as well. So it's easy to find. So now you know what switch it belongs to, and you can go find all that information. This is a very critical feature, especially if you lose devices. And it does happen. I know it happens quite a bit. And that is the end of the demo. I've shown you everything that we define here. We're always coming out with new features. There's a few new features coming out in the next couple months, so keep tuned for that. And we'll leave it at that. Any questions come through there, Monica?
We don't see any questions coming through here, so if anyone has one, type it really fast and send it to us. Otherwise, you can always reach out to us afterwards. Ryan, thank you so much.